The Ouagadougou sun, blazing and relentless, kissed the red earth, kicking up clouds of dust that danced in the hot air. For most, it was just another day in the vibrant capital, full of noisy markets, whizzing motorbikes, and the aroma of grilled meats and spices. But for Captain IBRAHIM Traoré, the air was heavy with a different tension, a dark premonition that had nothing to do with the weather. IBRAHIM was no stranger to the complex dance of power and political precarity that often characterized the region. As an officer in the armed forces, he had dedicated his life to serving and protecting Burkina Faso. He loved his country, its traditions, its resilient people, its stubborn hope despite adversity. But in recent months, a growing unease has haunted the corridors of power and the barracks. Whispered rumors, furtive glances, closed-door meetings that seemed more frequent and tense. Something was rotten in the state. Colonel Mamadou Diallo, the senior officer who summoned IBRAHIM to his cramped, airless office that afternoon, was not a man to beat around the bush. His face, lined by years of service under the African sun, was more somber than usual. "IBRAHIM," the colonel began, his voice hoarse, "you know we are in difficult times." IBRAHIM nodded. The precarious security in certain areas, the economic pressure, the growing popular disillusionment, he knew. "There's more," Diallo continued, leaning across the table and lowering his voice. "We have information, bits of intelligence, about a plot. A coup." IBRAHIM's heart skipped a beat. A blow? Again? Burkina's history was punctuated by such events, each leaving scars on the national psyche. "Who?" IBRAHIM asked, his voice low and urgent. Diallo hesitated, pain visible in his eyes. "High-ranking officials. Politicians. People we trusted. Concrete evidence?" IBRAHIM insisted. "Not enough. Rumors, suspicious meetings, movement of funds, but nothing that can be presented and dismantle this before it's too late. They're careful." Colonel Diallo looked intently at IBRAHIM. "That's why I called you, Captain. Your record is impeccable. You are known for your loyalty, but also for your sharp mind and your ability to blend in, to observe without being noticed." Diallo paused. The heat in the office seemed to increase tenfold. "We need someone inside. Someone who can infiltrate, listen, see, and bring us the evidence before these traitors plunge the country into chaos." IBRAHIM understood immediately what was being asked of him. An undercover mission. Not as a foreign spy from the movies, but as someone who would have to become a shadow in his own city, among people who could be his acquaintances or even friends. The danger was immense. If discovered, there would be no trial, just disappearance. But the image of Ouaga engulfed in violence, the hopes of its people trampled once again, weighed heavily on his soul. He thought of the faces of the Burkinabés he met every day, market workers, students, old men under the mango trees. They did not deserve this. "Colonel," IBRAHIM said, his voice firm, "I am at your disposal." Diallo nodded, relieved, but also with the gravity of the situation weighing on his shoulders. "This is the most dangerous mission of your career, IBRAHIM. You will be alone. No one will know who you really are except me and two other people you trust the most. If something goes wrong, we won't be able to intervene openly." The next few days were a whirlwind of covert preparation. A new identity was created, Moussa Touré, a man with murky but useful connections in the city's underworld, someone who could provide certain services, logistics, off-the-record information, access. He learned to walk, talk, and think like Moussa. He shed his polished uniform, his military bearing, even the idealistic gleam in his eyes. Moussa was cynical, interested only in profit and survival. It was a disguise that repudiated everything IBRAHIM Traoré stood for, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. Saying goodbye to his routine, without being able to explain it to anyone was the first pain of the mission. His military friends would think he had been transferred or was in secret training. His family, if he had one, history has made a point of keeping him relatively free of immediate ties to missions like this, would think he was just serving his country. The loneliness began even before he became Musa. A small amount of cash, disposable phones, convincing false documents, and a hidden gun were all Captain Ibrahim Traoré took with him to disappear and re-emerge as Musa Traoré on the dusty streets of Ouaga. From now on, he was a stranger in his own home, hunting wolves among sheep, hoping his disguise would be strong enough to keep him from being devoured. Ouaga's dawn seemed more uncertain than ever. Becoming Musa Traoré was not just a matter of donning different clothes and memorizing a new story. It was a complete re-education of the self. Ibrahim, the respected and idealistic officer, had to bury his principles deep in the ground to give life to Musa, the pragmatic and unscrupulous man who thrived on the margins of society. He rented a small room in a busy neighborhood where privacy was a luxury and constant surveillance was the norm. His new office was a corner in a noisy bar, where he mingled with a clientele of businessmen of all stripes, informants and shadowy figures. The first days as Musa were a silent torture. Ibrahim had to watch injustice, petty corruption, disrespectful talk about the country and its people without being able to intervene. His military training screamed for action, but Musa did not act. Musa watched, listened, and calculated. He offered small favors, asked seemingly innocent questions, built a reputation as someone who knew how to make things happen behind the scenes for a fair price. It was exhausting to maintain the facade. Every word, every gesture had to be deliberate. A misplaced smile, a question too direct, a judgmental look, any slip could expose Ibrahim and destroy the mission. He felt the weight of the disguise crushing his soul. He slept little, haunted by nightmares in which his true face was revealed and panic set in. Slowly, the strategy began to bear fruit. Through low-level contacts, Musa heard whispers of great opportunities from circles close to power. He made himself useful to people who needed to move goods without supervision, get inside information on bids, or simply find discreet places to meet. It was a dangerous game of small steps, each one potentially taking him closer to the fire. One of his contacts, a small businessman named Adama, who seemed to have connections everywhere, mentioned a man called the General, who liked efficiency and discretion. Musa feigned initial disinterest, then casually asked if there were any opportunities for someone with his logistical skills. Adama, unaware that he was connecting a fish to a predator, agreed to introduce Musa to a middleman. The go-between was a cynical, burly ex-sergeant named Salif. Salif tested Musa with small tasks at first, delivering packages without asking what was inside, arranging untraceable transportation. Musa accomplished everything with the efficiency and lack of curiosity that his cover demanded, earning Salif's superficial trust. It was through Salif that Musa got his first glimpse of the inner circle. Salif took him to a meeting in a discreet house on the outskirts of Ouaga. The atmosphere was tense but also arrogant. There were military officers in civilian clothes, wealthy businessmen, and one or two well-known politicians. Musa was instructed to stay close to the door, making sure that no one approached. His role was peripheral, but his position allowed him to hear fragments of the conversation in the room. "Timing is crucial," came an authoritative voice, which Salif later identified as that of General Diallo, the same Colonel Mamadou Diallo who had sent Ibrahim on the mission. No, Ibrahim realized with a shiver. This was other General Diallo, with a reputation for ruthless ambition. The coincidence of surnames was cruel. "The funds are secured," said another voice, which Musa recognized from the television, Minister Karim Sanogo, known for his fiery rhetoric and lavish lifestyle. Units loyal to the president will be neutralized first, added a third, an officer Musa recognized with disgust, Major Kamara, a man he once respected. Ibrahim's heart was beating furiously in his chest, a silent alarm drum beneath Mousa's calm facade. They were talking openly about the coup, about neutralizing loyal units that meant his own comrades, perhaps even Colonel Mamadou Diallo. As Musa stood motionless and expressionless by the door, Ibrahim's mind worked feverishly. He needed more. Specific names, dates, locations, detailed plans. Fragments would not be enough to convince higher command to act. The stakes grew higher with each passing day. Musa delved deeper into the swamp of conspiracy, meeting ever more dangerous people. He had to smile at men who planned to shed innocent blood, shake hands with traitors who wanted to plunder the country. Every interaction was an affront to his own morality. There were moments when the revulsion was so great that he feared his disguise would fail, that the true fury and despair in their eyes would become visible. One evening, Musa was at a bar where Salif and other conspirators were relaxing. Their conversation, fueled by drink, became more casual. They laughed at how naive the people were, how easy power was to seize if bold enough. They casually discussed who would be removed when they took control: oppositionists, honest officers, anyone who posed a threat. Hearing those words, full of contempt for human life and the future of Burkina Faso, was a blow more painful than any battle wound. Ibrahim felt a cold rage settle in his stomach. It wasn't just about power or money for these men. It was about absolute control, about crushing any resistance, about treating the country as their personal fiefdom. He remembered why he was doing this. Not for the president, not for the current government, but for the people. For the hope he saw in the eyes of the children in Ouaga, for the dignity of the elderly, for the hard work of the farmers and traders. They were the true heart of Burkina Faso. And these men were planning to rip that heart out. At this point in the story, with Musa/Ibrahim deeply immersed in danger and witnessing the true face of betrayal, perhaps you, who are following me, might ask yourself, what would you do if you were in Ibrahim's shoes, surrounded by people who plan to destroy everything you love, and having to pretend to agree with them? What emotion would be the hardest to bear? Share your thoughts in the comments. With each new piece of information, with each new name of a conspirator identified, the weight on Ibrahim's shoulders grew. He had to find a secure way to convey what he knew to Colonel Mamadou Diallo. The secret communications network was tenuous, based on simple codes and quick meetings in public places, where the danger of being followed was constant. With each transmission, the risk of being intercepted grew. But time was running out. The date of the coup was approaching, and the darkness over Ouaga was growing thicker. Moussa Touré, the shadow behind the scenes, became increasingly indispensable to the conspirators, especially to Salif, who became his direct link to General Diallo and Minister Sanogo. Moussa organized the logistics for the movement of equipment, facilitated secret meetings, and ensured the discretion of the preliminary operations. Each task was an opportunity to gather more details, to confirm names, to understand the scale of the operation. He discovered that the plan involved the simultaneous seizure of strategic points in the capital, the presidential palace, the headquarters of national radio and television, the main military barracks and communications centers. Loyal units would be attacked by surprise or isolated. There would be a fabricated public justification, blaming the current government for corruption and inefficiency, a narrative that resonated with part of the population, but which, coming from the lips of these men, was hypocrisy at its purest. The date was set for the end of the week. The news hit Ibrahim like a ton of bricks. There were only a few days left. The sheer adrenaline kept him going, but the fatigue of constant vigilance and the moral burden was taking its toll. He looked thinner, his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to hide it, held a depth of melancholy and exhaustion that did not belong to Moussa TRAORÉ. The opportunity to obtain definitive proof came unexpectedly. Salif, trusting Moussa and perhaps a little arrogant, asked him to help transport important documents to a secure location before the big day. Salif would be present, but Moussa would do most of the physical work. It was too risky to handle the plans directly, but IBRAHIM realized that this might be his only chance to gain direct access to something irrefutable. During the transport, taking advantage of a moment of distraction on Salif's part, IBRAHIM, with steady hands and a galloping heart, managed to discreetly photograph some crucial pages of the documents with a small device that Colonel Diallo had given him. There were maps, target lists, timelines, and most importantly, a list of names with signatures and allocations of responsibility. The final test. It was all there. The tension was almost unbearable. He had the information now, but he had to get it out of there. The next communication with Colonel Mamadou Diallo was scheduled for the following morning, in a crowded market, disguised as a chance meeting between two strangers. The night before the meeting was the longest of IBRAHIM's life. He couldn't sleep. I reviewed every step, every detail. If Salif or any of the others suspected anything, if the device was discovered, if the meeting with the colonel was compromised, Burkina Faso's future hung in the balance. The hubbub in the market was deafening, vendors shouting, motorbikes honking, music blaring. Amid the controlled chaos, IBRAHIM, still as Moussa, looked for the agreed signal. He saw Colonel Diallo, disguised as an elderly merchant, at his fabric stall. With a lump in his throat, Moussa approached, noisily bargained for a piece of cloth, and in a quick, discreet movement, exchanged a small bag. Inside Mousa's bag was the device with the evidence. In the colonel's bag, a silent confirmation. Understood. Get ready. The time is now. As he walked away, Moussa felt the weight of the past few weeks finally begin to lift, replaced by a cold determination. He had done his part. Now it was up to the colonel and the loyalist forces to act. He returned to his room, waiting, every minute imagining the movements that were being made in the city, the counterintelligence operation being mounted. The dawn of the planned day for the coup was approaching. The conspirators' plan was to begin the simultaneous seizure of strategic points in the capital, the presidential palace, the headquarters of the national radio and television station, the main military barracks and communications centers. Loyal units would be attacked by surprise or isolated. There would be a fabricated public justification, blaming the current government for corruption and inefficiency, a narrative that resonated with part of the population, but which, coming from the lips of these men, was hypocrisy in its purest form. The date was set for the end of the week. The news hit IBRAHIM like a ton of bricks. There were only a few days left. The sheer adrenaline kept him going, but the fatigue of constant vigilance and the moral burden was taking its toll. He looked thinner, his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to hide it, held a depth of melancholy and exhaustion that did not belong to Moussa TRAORÉ. The opportunity to obtain definitive proof came unexpectedly. Salif, trusting Moussa and perhaps a little arrogant, asked him to help transport important documents to a secure location before the big day. Salif would be present, but Moussa would do most of the physical work. It was too risky to handle the plans directly, but IBRAHIM realized that this might be his only chance to gain direct access to something irrefutable. During the transport, taking advantage of a moment of distraction on Salif's part, IBRAHIM, with steady hands and a galloping heart, managed to discreetly photograph some crucial pages of the documents with a small device that Colonel Diallo had given him. There were maps, target lists, timelines, and most importantly, a list of names with signatures and allocations of responsibility. The final test. It was all there. The tension was almost unbearable. He had the information now, but he had to get it out of there. The next communication with Colonel Mamadou Diallo was scheduled for the following morning, in a crowded market, disguised as a chance meeting between two strangers. The night before the meeting was the longest of Ibrahim's life. He couldn't sleep. I reviewed every step, every detail. If Salif or any of the others suspected anything, if the device was discovered, if the meeting with the colonel was compromised. Burkina Faso's future hung in the balance. The hubbub in the market was deafening, vendors shouting, motorbikes honking, music blaring. Amid the controlled chaos, Ibrahim, still as Musa, looked for the agreed signal. He saw Colonel Diallo, disguised as an elderly merchant, at his fabric stall. With a lump in his throat, Musa approached, noisily bargained for a piece of cloth, and in a quick, discreet movement, exchanged a small bag. Inside Mouse's bag was the device with the evidence. In the colonel's bag, a silent confirmation. Understood. Get ready. The time is now. As he walked away, Musa felt the weight of the past few weeks finally begin to lift, replaced by a cold determination. He had done his part. Now it was up to the colonel and the loyalist forces to act. He returned to his room, waiting, every minute imagining the movements that were being made in the city, the counterintelligence operation being mounted. The dawn of the planned day for the coup was approaching. The conspirators' plan was to begin taking strategic points before sunrise, when most citizens, and even some loyal military personnel, would be least vigilant. They believed in surprise and speed. Little did they know that Colonel Mamadou Diallo and his men, armed with Ibrahim's vital intelligence, were one step ahead. The final hours were the most agonizing. Ibrahim, abandoning the persona of Musa and reassuming his military identity in secret, made his way to a safe rendezvous point determined by Colonel Diallo, where he would finally reunite with the loyalist forces. The journey there was tense, every shadow a potential traitor, every sudden sound a harbinger of ambush. He arrived at the designated location, a lesser-known barracks on the outskirts of the city, still under the cover of pre-dawn darkness. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and tension. Loyal officers, faces grim and determined, were gathered, reviewing maps and orders. Colonel Mamadou Diallo greeted him with a firm handshake and a look of deep respect. "You did it, Captain," Diallo said, his voice thick with pent-up emotion. "The evidence is irrefutable. Their plan has been uncovered. We are ready." Ibrahim felt a wave of relief, so strong it nearly knocked him over. But there was no time for rest. The operation to foil the coup was underway. Loyalist units were moving to neutralize the plotters' staging points before they could act. There were scattered clashes across the city in the hours that followed. Gunshots rang out in the distance. The coup attempt was thwarted in its infancy, thanks to intelligence provided by Ibrahim. The main leaders of the plot, General Diallo, Minister Sanogo, Major Kamara, and others identified by Musa, were taken by surprise and detained by loyalist forces before they could carry out the crucial phase of their plans. Dawn came, not with the sound of a successful coup and the uncertainty of chaos, but with the silent confirmation that the attempt had been foiled. The city woke slowly, initially oblivious to the danger that had been averted in the dead of night. The next phase was as crucial as the infiltration, the settling of accounts. The coup leaders could not simply disappear. The future stability of Burkina Faso required that the truth be revealed and that justice, in some form, be served. Given the political climate and the nature of the betrayal, a lengthy public trial could be risky, opening the door to destabilization. The decision was made to adopt a form of internal military tribunal, where the evidence would be presented and a judgment would be handed down by the accused's own peers and superiors, the loyal officers who had risked their lives to defend the country. The venue was a secure conference room within the military headquarters, bare and austere. A long table dominated the center. On one side sat Colonel Mamadou Diallo, and a council of other high-ranking officers, their faces serious and solemn. On the other side, guarded by armed guards, sat the accused, General Diallo, the conspirator, Minister Sanogo, Major Kamara, and a handful of other ringleaders. The arrogance Musa had seen in them was now replaced by a mixture of suppressed fury, denial, and, on some of their faces, a glimmer of fear. Then the door opened and Captain IBRAHIM TRAORÉ entered. Not the impeccably uniformed officer from the beginning of the story, but a man who seemed to be carrying the weight of weeks of disguise and danger. His eyes, however, shone with a cold, determined intensity. He wore no uniform. He was dressed simply, a symbolic transition between the disguise he had worn and the identity he was reasserting. There was a tense silence as the accused recognized the face of the man they had known as Moussa Touré. General Diallo and Minister Sanogo stared at him in disbelief and shock, followed by sudden, violent anger. "You?" General Diallo hissed, pointing a trembling finger at IBRAHIM. "The rat! The traitor among us!" IBRAHIM stopped before the table, his military posture instinctively returning. He did not respond to the provocation. His eyes fixed on the faces of the men who were willing to sacrifice their country for their own greed. "Gentlemen," Colonel Mamadou Diallo began, his voice ringing in the room. "We are gathered here today to consider the evidence of a heinous betrayal against Burkina Faso. The evidence was gathered at great risk by a loyal officer who infiltrated the ranks of the conspirators." He gestured to IBRAHIM. "Captain IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, who operated undercover as Moussa Touré. He will bring the truth before you." IBRAHIM stepped forward. He began to speak, his voice calm at first, then gaining strength as he revisited his weeks undercover. He described his undercover life, his daily life as Moussa Touré, the facade he had to maintain. He recounted the conversations he had overheard, the plots he had witnessed. He mentioned names, dates, specific locations. He described the meeting in the house on the outskirts, repeating the words he had heard. "Timing is crucial, funding is secured, loyal units will be neutralized." He looked directly at General Diallo and Minister Sanogo as he spoke, seeing the denial and fury in their eyes. "I saw the target list, General," IBRAHIM said, his voice thick with restrained emotion. "I saw the maps. I heard you laugh at the idea of removing anyone who opposed you." He took out the small device and placed it on the table. "And here is the proof. Photographs of your own plans with your own signatures." A murmur ran through the council table. The accused were visibly shaken. Major Kamara hung his head. Minister Sanogo stammered protests, calling it all a fabrication, a trap. But General Diallo remained silent, his facade of control cracking. IBRAHIM continued, his voice now not just reporting facts, but also carrying the moral weight of his mission. He spoke of the contempt he heard in the conspirators' voices for the ordinary people of Burkina Faso. He spoke of the betrayal of their oath, the violation of the people's trust. "I had to become someone I despised to find out what you were doing," IBRAHIM said, looking at them with a mixture of sadness and contempt. "I heard you planned to spill the blood of my brothers and sisters, to set fire to the hopes of this country. For what? For power? For money?" He paused, emotion thick in the air. "You are not just traitors to the military or to the government. You are traitors to Burkina Faso, to the people. You have betrayed the future we swore to protect." The silence in the room was oppressive. The truth, spoken with the calm authority of one who had unearthed it at great risk, hung in the air. Captain IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, the man who had lived among them as Moussa Touré, now confronted them with the very darkness they had tried to hide. Colonel Mamadou Diallo nodded slowly. "The evidence is clear. The coup attempt was real, and led by these men here present." He looked at the council. There was no need for long deliberations. The risks that had been avoided, the blood that could have been spilled, the future that had nearly been hijacked, all of it weighed on their minds. Captain Traoré's loyalty and sacrifice were a stark contrast to the betrayal of the men sitting across from them. General Diallo, Minister Sanogo, Major Kamara, and the others, Colonel Mamadou Diallo declared, his voice firm and grave. You have been found guilty of high treason against the nation of Burkina Faso on the basis of the overwhelming evidence presented. He paused, his gaze stern. Your ranks and titles are hereby revoked, effective immediately. You will be detained and face the full legal consequences of your actions, in accordance with military and civilian law. There were no cries of protest or attempts at negotiation. The accused, finally confronted with the reality of their exposure and the weight of the evidence, seemed to shrink. The facade of power and impunity crumbled. They were led out of the room under guard, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Ibrahim Traoré watched them go, a feeling of relief and emptiness mingling in his chest. He had accomplished his mission. The plot had been exposed, the traitors had been identified and confronted. The trial, though not a public spectacle, was a moment of reckoning where truth prevailed over conspiracy. After the confrontation, the silence in the room seemed even deeper. The adrenaline that had driven Ibrahim for weeks began to fade, leaving him exhausted. Colonel Mamadou Diallo approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You saved the country, Ibrahim, the colonel said, sincerity in his eyes. Your courage and sacrifice will not be forgotten. Ibrahim nodded, his throat tight. The sacrifice, he thought of the price paid. Not just the physical risk, but the psychological cost of living a lie, of suppressing your own identity and morality, of witnessing human baseness up close. Moussa Touré's persona would leave scars. He wondered if he would ever feel completely like Ibrahim Traoré again. The days and weeks that followed were critical for Burkina Faso. News of the failed coup attempt and the arrest of the conspirators spread. There was a mixture of shock, outrage, and relief among the population. Transparency about what had happened, even if limited at first, was important in restoring a measure of trust in the institutions that had remained loyal. Ibrahim, his vital role in exposing the plot kept secret for his own safety, and that of military intelligence, was quietly reinstated. He received no public plaudits or ceremonial medals. His reward was deeper, the knowledge that he had acted to protect his people, that he had braved the darkness and helped ensure that the dawn over Ouaga could break without the shadow of a successful coup. He returned to his old barracks, to his routine. But nothing was the same. The people he had known before, he saw with a new perspective, aware of the fragility of trust and how easily loyalty could break. He saw the streets of Ouaga through Ibrahim's and Mousa's eyes, the resilient beauty of everyday life mixed with the constant awareness of the undercurrents of danger and corruption. There was a sense of victory, yes, but not complete victory. The coup attempt had been averted, but the conditions that had led to it, the instability, the disillusionment, the struggle for power, still existed. The struggle to build a secure and prosperous Burkina Faso was far from over. Ibrahim Traoré, the captain who had become a shadow to save his country, now bore the burden of this knowledge. He knew that vigilance was eternal, that the defense of the nation was not only against external threats but also, and perhaps above all, against treason that could arise from within. He walked through the streets of Ouaga, blending into the crowds. No one on the street would recognize him as the hero who had foiled a coup. Most would never know his name. But when he felt the red dust beneath his feet or saw the smile of a child in the market, he was reminded of why it had been worth it. The heart of Burkina Faso was still beating, strong and resilient. And he, Ibrahim Traoré, had played a crucial role in keeping it that way. Dawn had come, bringing with it renewed hope, but also the awareness that the fight for a better future was an ongoing journey, requiring courage, vigilance, and, above all, unwavering loyalty to the people. The story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, the courage and loyalty of one individual can make a monumental difference. It is a tale of sacrifice, the exposure of betrayal, and the ongoing struggle for justice and stability in a complex and beloved nation. The trial of the traitors in the silence of dawn was not the end of the struggle, but rather a crucial step in ensuring that Burkina Faso could face the sunrise of a new day with the hope, however fragile, of a better future. And so, Moussa Touré's shadow faded into the hot Ouaga air, leaving behind only Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a man marked by his mission, but unwavering in his commitment to Burkina Faso. His story is a silent testament to the dedication of those who serve behind the scenes, risking everything to protect the heart of their nation.